Well, today on the Momentous Sports podcast, I'm joined by a guest that I've wanted to have for a long time, and that is none other than Peter Trevisani. Peter's the founder and president of New Mexico United. Peter's journey is a fascinating one, from his days as a student athlete at Boston College to a successful career in finance, and then to taking a leap of faith to bring professional soccer to New Mexico. In just a few short years, United has become one of the most passionate clubs in American soccer, selling out matches, building a thriving merchandise culture, and becoming a central part of Albuquerque's identity. We'll explore his journey, the community impact of the club, the stadium project that could redefine his future, and what all this tells us about sports as an asset class. So, Peter, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, Kyle, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Let me ask you a few questions right out of the gate. Football player at Boston College, goes into the finance world, finds his way out to the West Coast of the US. What was the journey from that background to deciding at a point in time, you know what, I'm going to start a professional soccer club in Albuquerque, New Mexico?
Well, you're trying to cover a lot of anxiety, angst, and midlife crises in one question here. There's it's point A to Z, and it looks like the stock market in 2008, up and down all around. So, I think that I mean, there's a couple common threads. One, I grew up loving sports. I actually grew up in Boston. I've been out in New Mexico for 25 years, so self-identified New Mexican, and and I think in that time, just loved sports as a kid, loved going to Celtics games, Bruins games. My grandfather had a sports bar before they had sports bar inside the Boston Garden. A lot of smoking and drinking going on, maybe some, betting. Who knows what was happening? I was only 12 or 13 years old, but I did, over those years get to build some bonds with some of the players from the Celtics and Bruins, and because it was more like a family atmosphere and community atmosphere. And so I really sort of, without real understanding it, saw that the impact of that sports have on community, and then through so many other pieces, which we can get into or skip over. That was really the piece that I hung on to for New Mexico United. Wasn't a sports team, it was a community asset, and I wanted to make sure we built something that was for the community.
I think that, in the time that we've known you, and that's about 18 months or so now, and I know as much about New Mexico United as I do most other clubs, which is why repping the
Good looking
jersey here.
jersey.
I mean, it is this Meow Wolf logo and branding. I think Meow Wolf Night's coming up for you all here
Oh
very
yeah.
soon. And done an incredible job with it. But I had a chance to visit. We'll probably share some photos of you and I standing in the supporter section. But what was it about? Did you feel like something was missing in New Mexico, in Albuquerque? One thing you noticed right away, your team's called New Mexico United,
hmm
not the name of Albuquerque or Albuquerque United. So what was the reason for that naming, and what did you see in Albuquerque that made you say, you know what, I can build a successful sports franchise here?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I grew up playing American football. That's not soccer football, and never thought I would own a sports team, let alone a soccer team, and probably never would have, except around the year 2016. And by the way, this is not a political statement. This is just an observation. I was picking up on just how divided people were becoming, whatever your beliefs were, and it just seemed like we were starting to identify people more about what they represented. Were they, who did they vote for? What God did they pray to? Language did they speak? What's their sexuality? There are all these things that people wanted to be dividing, were divisive lines. And I'm a big believer in people, and I always have been. I think that so many times as humans, we are, we're not put in a position to be, to show ourselves at our fullest potential. And I was really just becoming upset at the divisiveness. So for me, I wanted to try to do something in a small way that would bring people together and start focusing on the things we have the commonality that we have as humans, and especially like as Americans and as New Mexicans, that we start to break it down. like 98% of what we are is in common, and let's go focus on that. And we can then do the 2% some other time that we don't have in common. And that's where, we start up, that's why it had to be New Mexico United and not the Chupacabras or the Blue Skies or the, Green Chilies or anything like that. It had to be United because this was going to be our platform that for 90 minutes, no matter who you are, what you're doing, what your beliefs in are outside of the game, for 90 minutes, we can all agree that was the worst call we've ever seen on the field. And that ref needs to be, shown out the door, or, this is our team, ride or die. So that's what we wanted to set out to accomplish and have really focused on.
Talking about that accomplishment, I guess it was last season that I joined you in Albuquerque for a match, and I was really taken back. I think it was 10 or 11,000 fans. The supporter section is incredible right there behind the goal. It really, really felt like a big time sporting event. Like that was the entire experience that I felt and took in. I'm curious if you rewind to when you started the club. How many years now has it been?
We're in our
What season
seventh
is this?
season, number 7.
So rewinding 7 seasons, and you can throw out COVID because that was a challenge for everybody. Do you think that how do you grade yourself? Where do you think you are on doing what you set out to do with creating that community feeling, that, one common thread that everybody can get excited about? I mean, I feel as though you've done a great job at that, but I don't necessarily know from your perspective of how you feel that's gone. And I'm curious of that.
Well, look, we're always in search of continuous improvement and what we can do better. We spend so much time focusing on what didn't go right, or, then, and we lose track of how much did go right. But if I'm being honest, when we went back and we were looking at all the spreadsheets for New Mexico United, and, for people that don't really know New Mexico, it's about the 5th biggest state geographically. We have 2 million people, which make it one of the smallest in terms of number of people. People are spread out here. There's not a lot of wealth in New Mexico. It's a very diverse community wise. You have a lot of Native American cultures. You have Hispanic, Spanish, going back 500 years, when Santa Fe, which is the oldest capital in America, it's 400 years old, when it was settled, and then, a big Anglo population. So it is like no other place in this country. And so when we're looking at the spreadsheets didn't make any sense to the team. They were screaming, just saying, no, do not go forward with this team. There's not enough people. There's not enough money. They're too spread out. And so we did what, any reasonable person would do with the finance background. We ignored, the reasons to say no and focused on reasons to say yes, because we really wanted to do it. So going in back to your question, I think that in terms of the number of people that showed up for the games or continue to show up, we just had 11,500 at the lab. That definitely exceeded our expectations. There's no doubt about it. We were hopeful that would happen, and we wanted to build something that would feel important enough. But when it comes to the feeling of New Mexico United, I feel like that is what we wanted, and it really came true. This was a love story. This was this was about, creating more hopefulness, more unity, showing that when we come together and say yes, we can make anything possible. And ultimately, New Mexico United was about believing in ourselves. We didn't need anyone in Texas to believe in us, or Seattle, or England, or anywhere. All we needed were New Mexicans to believe in ourselves. And that's why the feeling behind the goal, that passion that you feel, isn't about soccer. Those are individuals that want to shout out to the rest of the world. This is what New Mexico looks like, and it looks pretty great.
For all those, I agree with that from my firsthand experience. For all of those fans to get there, to even get a team on the pitch, to figure out where you're going to practice, hire a coach, like all these things that go into what the fans see, which is ultimately a team on the pitch performing. Like there is an unbelievable amount of work that I don't think most people realize, no matter what level of professional sport you're at, that is often overlooked and I think taken for granted by the fans. How do you remember when you went from, this is a very interesting idea to do this potentially, to a point where you said, okay, I'm going all in on this. Do you remember what that trigger was, or what gave you the conviction to move forward? Because I think a lot of people in life like to think about things and ideate and dream about, oh, this could be incredible, but it's so hard to go from 0 to 1. So, like, how did you get from 0 to 1, both kind of in your own psychology, but with the people around you that you need to support from to do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think in one hand, it might seem like it came out of the blue, but I think if you really break it down, we're constantly putting in place the building blocks of our lives. That's in work, it's in family, it's in our could be in spirituality, it's in all of these things, and they don't just happen overnight. And so I look at some of the things I had done before that had gotten me there. And while if you had written them down or just looked at them, you wouldn't say, "Oh, you're going to own a sports team and you're going to create this thing from nothing." But I think those experiences added up, and the one that happened really right before the team, which would seem completely disjointed, but it wasn't, is that I have a real passion for immersive art, immersive theater, and we had this group of crazy kids in Santa Fe that called themselves Meow Wolf, and I loved them because these were artists, but the art they wanted to create was not the art that the galleries wanted to sell to people coming in from Dallas and California. And so rather than just changing their art to fit the form that could be commercially successful, they decided we're going to create our own art space and have people come and gather. And it was wildly ambitious, and they set off on doing that. The Meow Wolf story, origin story, could be a whole podcast in itself, but George Martin from Game of Thrones got involved. A lot of people from the Santa Fe community, including our family, got involved, and now Meow Wolf is a multi-billion-dollar immersive art, installation. But for me, and why that's relative for United, is because I worked with them for about a year just to really, because I loved it and wanted to see them, take a step forward, and was able to help in a small way. But up until that moment, if you'd asked me about a sports team, like, I'm not really interested in rah rah, kill them, we're better than you, win and lose. But working at Meow Wolf started to make me believe we could reimagine sports in a different way. What if it wasn't really about just winning and losing, knowing that that is ultimately a huge part of sports, but how do we blend things like art and sport? How do we make it so it's
Mm.
for everyone, that everyone feels like they can come to the game, and it's for them, and you don't have, the club could be something that you support or not, but it's uplifting into the community. And so Meowth really got me reimagining what a sports team could look like, and with just that little bit of confidence and change of perspective,
Mm.
that was enough for me to say, let's just go for it. Meow Wolf went for it. Why can't we go for it? And if we don't go for it, nothing will change. Meow Wolf hadn't created, I can't imagine. Santa Fe, New Mexico is the hub for immersive art around the globe. It has inspired so many people in so many nooks of this planet, and if they hadn't said yes, that never would have existed. And so while we're not, inspiring everyone around the world, maybe there is someone thinking about doing a club in Czechoslovakia, and they're hunting around and they see United, and it gives them some thoughts. So anyways, this is where we kind of got going, and why we said yes to doing a team, and I'm really happy we did.
So am I. How when you I think you've parlayed that extremely well for the listeners. If you were to hold up USL clubs and their revenue metrics against one another, you would see, from a merch perspective, from a ticket sales perspective, from a number of perspectives, New Mexico United is, in that top threshold, which candidly, when you think about Albuquerque, obviously, like, those metrics don't jump to the top if you're trying to anticipate, what a revenue, or what revenue categories may unfold. What has surprised you along the way? And, like, in particular, Obviously you think about wanting to have 9 or 10,000 people in a AAA baseball stadium, which is where you all play today, and we'll get to that here in a little bit. But what has surprised you about how the community has accepted the team? I obviously met many on your staff. I think you have one of the best staffs at this level of professional sport across the globe. Is it the overall team that's created the success and the team that you've built? And what has surprised you along the way, maybe that you didn't anticipate?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple things in there. One is that we felt that to make this team successful, it had to feel important. You know, people, especially in New Mexico, on one hand, on the upside, we didn't have a lot of other professional teams that we had to compete against, right? We're not in the New York City or LA market, and we're the eighth, professional team, and then there's all these other things. So, we don't have any really other pro sports team. We do have a AAA baseball team, which is amazing, but those players are on, they're they're for like playing for another club, and they're just really trying to get up to that other club. Our players play for New Mexico United. They may go on to other clubs, they may not, but this is a pro team, and our players are our players, and so we needed to make it. So that was good, but then we needed to make it feel important enough. As I mentioned, we're not a wealthy state, which means that when people come to a New Mexico United game, it means they're saying no to something else. They're not going out to dinner. If they buy the jersey you're wearing, they're not buying another jersey. It's more binary than that. And some environments it can be more frivolous and, oh, I'll get tickets or not. So we said we have to fight for mind share, and we have to make it worthwhile. And that meant that we needed to really touch people emotionally, not just have it be like a piece of candy for 90 minutes that tastes great and then you leave and it's gone. We needed them to carry it around in their heart and to be feeling the team. And so we went for that, not really knowing what that looked like. We didn't really have a blueprint for it. And when you say what has surprised me is, I think what surprised me is how hard that has hit. And I come to tears sometimes when I talk to someone and I see on their arm they have a United shield, and there's a tremendous sense of responsibility that this person has tattooed their body permanently, uh, and we're the custodians of that creation. So there's a tremendous amount of responsibility that goes around with creating something that makes people feel so passionately deep inside. And then the last something I've really learned. Yeah, I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is a bit of an enclave. It's a wealthy town. There's a lot of people that come from all over. Albuquerque is very different. It's an amazing city. I've come to know it so well, but it's got a little more grit to it, I'll just say. And there's a lot of loss here. I've met so many fans that almost everyone here has experienced a sense of loss on a personal level, and much more so than I was accustomed to. And so you don't want to disappoint them. You don't want them, and they're almost like ready to be, oh, this can't be, this is going to leave. You're going to abandon us. We fall in love with you and then you're going to take off. And so our key here is to build a club for the next 100 years that goes way beyond a player, a coach, an owner, or even our fans that are part of New Mexico United 1.0. In 100 years, they won't really, most of them won't be here. I did see a little baby at the game. I'm like, this is cool that he may be here for the 100-year anniversary, but we need to let them know that it won't be taken away, and we're not going to let them down. And we're here to show everybody we are good enough, and we've earned it, and we're going to keep it, and we're going to have it forever.
I think that I love that, and I think that I felt that not only in the fans, but in the time that I spent with each of the department heads within your organization. And so I'm curious, you know, when you thought about who you're going to surround yourself with, which may have been some of the most critical decisions that you had getting out of the gate, what did you think of from a leadership perspective, or from a, hey, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to found this team. I'm going to provide the capital necessary to get it off the ground, but I need a support system around me to do that. Obviously, Ron Patel is an incredible operator, operating the club for you, but you have so many more that are in those offices, from executives all the way down to who I'm buying my shirt from when I come into your team shop. like how did you like what were the core foundational cultural pieces at the organizational level that you wanted to put in place to be able to execute this?
Yeah, well, I mean, for you mentioned Ron Patel, and it's really I'm glad you did because without Ron Patel, this doesn't happen. He did the Albuquerque Soul, which was a PDL team, college kids. He had the idea to go pro. He kind of approached me about it. I said, "You're crazy. We'll never work here." And it wasn't until then I spent a year living in Barcelona and I saw what a team Barcelona wasn't just a huge brand. It really moved that city. That city lived and died by that team and what it represented. And I was like, wow, we could maybe bring something like that back to New Mexico. So I saw a lot. I joke that I hijacked Ron Patel's dream and made it my own. But without Ron, this doesn't happen. He's the president of the club. He's the leader of the club, and so thankful for him. And I think anyone starting a club or even a business, so important to have a partner that you trust and believe in. That being said, there are a lot of other people, and one commonality on almost every single staff member, like maybe with only one or two exceptions, no sports experience. None of us come from a
Wow.
sports background. We didn't build another team. We didn't work for the Giants or the Jets or the MLS team or anything. We none of us, and many of our employees come from New Mexico. Occasionally, we recruit someone from outside of the state, but I think like 90% have come from New Mexico, meaning they have no sports experience. But so many of our employees have a deep passion for this team, or their kids love the team, and so they realize, so there's that sense of responsibility is carried. It's not a 9 to 5 job. I think the people that work for the club understand the mission, they understand the importance, and they realize that we don't own this team, we're the custodians of it, meaning we're keeping it safe and safeguarding it. And you see it with the work they do. That they work incredibly hard. It's not a high-paying career generally, especially um, most sports jobs aren't, frankly, except unless you play or coach or run a team, and you have to do it for heart. But I'll also just say this: I've seen tremendous growth from a lot of these employees. We had to believe in them because they didn't have a track record, and they've either thrived at United, or we've had at least a half a dozen employees go, and now they are in a MLS squad or NBA, or they've gone on to other organizations.
It was so noticeable to me. I felt extremely welcomed and accepted, although I was this new person just stepping in for a few days, and it really stood out to me. I'm curious for those that are listening, and I think our audience is a couple people. It's team owners, it's entrepreneurs, it's athletes, it's deal makers within sports. A lot of people kind of understand, or maybe they don't, what it takes to stand up a team. But when you're building a organizational structure at, let's call it, the USL championship level, what does that actually look like? What size of staff do you generally have? How many general departments are there? Just so the audience can get a sense of what it is that you have to pull off from an operations perspective.
Yeah, well, I could just talk about our experience. And
Yep.
again, I'll just reiterate, I didn't have professional sports experience. Ron, really didn't either. We were kind of coming at it, blind. And so the first thing that we did is we tried to have as small a team as possible without being so small that we weren't able to, you know, you do need some light and water to grow if you're a plant, but we didn't want to just throw too much light and sunshine on it because that's not great either. We wanted to make sure there was some deep roots. So what I would just say is that we built a lean and mean team, and we took our time with some of the hires. The second thing we did is we looked at what the USL recommended for hires and where they were, where they said you should have 6 people in ticketing and one in marketing and et cetera. And we just ripped that up and threw it away. We said, we don't, this isn't about what might work in Jacksonville or in Minnesota or anywhere else. What do we need to do in New Mexico? And we realized at a very early stage from before day one that we are not going to just get on the phone and call people up and have them come to a game. That's not going to be our methodology. If we're going to build a feeling, we need to show them what that feeling is. And look, this is sounds very basic, but we understood that the power of the internet was simply that if we gathered compelling content, people would be attracted to it. We wouldn't have to know who they are. They would find us in a way. And as they found us, that would be the invitation into the club. So while we had one ticketing person, we had three people right off the bat on our marketing team, which grew. We actually at any time probably have three videographers, at least two full-time and a part-time. That is as much as any MLS team out there. And the reason is because we're telling stories. So we need to show images. We travel. I think we're probably the only team in the USL that regularly travels one of our social media people to the games to take pictures, tell the story, because we need to, keep that connection. We don't want to rely on other people's images all the time. And I constantly get yelled at by the league because when we score a goal at home, you'll see, if you're panning out, you'll see like three or four people, social media people, running on the field and getting the camera inside the huddle. And the league's like, you can't do that. You can't be on the field. But you see the images when you are inside the circle after a goal, and you can see the sweat and hear the cries, not because they're looking at the camera cheering, but because they're celebrating. That's it. This is the immersive theater. We want people to feel like, oh, I'm in that circle. That's like as close as I can get without actually lacing up the boots. And so we're going to keep being brave. We're going to keep taking chances. And hopefully, rather than the league or, anyone saying, well, that's not how it was done before and you can't do that, be like, maybe there's a great idea. Maybe when a goal is scored, we should have people running on the field to take those images and bringing that back to people at home. So we're going to just keep doing our thing. I can't tell you what we did in New Mexico will work if you're starting a team. You're going to have to figure out what's authentic for you, what's the piece you're going for, stay true to it, go for it, believe in it, and be ready to pivot if it's not, and be open-minded. But just if you believe in it, if you don't believe in it, nobody else will. And if you believe in it, other people will believe in you.
I think that's one of the things that has stuck out to me the most at the USL level as it relates to marketing. You guys have done an unbelievable job. I from here in Berlin, Germany, obviously my algorithm points me to you guys a decent amount and has for a while now. But whether it's you, whether it's Rob and Charleston, I think, you two really stick out in a way that has said like, wow, these guys absolutely understand how important storytelling is, how important authentic marketing is. I'm glad you illustrated that there. But I think, for the USL, for any league in sports, right, that is the future. It's the ability to tell stories around your athletes. It's ability to tell stories around your fans. I know that you guys really get them involved as well and have a number of programs that you guys highlight throughout the course of the season and during games. So I want to take a step back here for a second. I've said USL a number of times. I'm taking for granted that everybody listening today is familiar with the USL, and I don't know that's the case, which is the great point of having these conversations. Is opening up the world to what exists out there. Could you give a 1 minute description of what the USL today is and where it is? We'll get into in a few minutes of where it may be going and some of the announcements that have been made this year. But how do you classify what the USL is and where it fits in US soccer?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing I just say is if you know anyone listening that knows the USL, I'm really impressed. That's amazing. So, and if you don't, that's okay. It is growing, and if today's the first day you're hearing about it, it's going to be something that you're going to hear more and more about. I think that probably the easiest way to explain it is probably the way I hate explaining it, but it's that the USL is a second division soccer league in the United States. The top division is the Major League Soccer, and then there's USL, and USL Championship is the top of the USL pyramid. The easy analogy is to think about a Major League Baseball team and a AAA baseball team, minor league. But there's a huge difference. And the huge difference is that in the USL, the teams, whether it's the Charleston Battery, New Mexico United, Orange County, they are not a team that is owned by another team in the MLS. They're independent organizations, They are focused on building a team for their city, and they're focused on winning a championship for their city. And if their players do well, if you're a AAA baseball player and you hit 12 home runs in a month, you get called up. If you score 12 goals in a month in the USL, you might get called up, but you might get called up by a team in Germany or a team in Tokyo or MLS. And really the club would work out usually what's called a transfer. So it's very different than minor leagues. It's a pro team. And what I really love about it is that it means that it can really represent the community. And while this is going to go past a minute, I think the importance of the USL is critical to understand. And soccer obviously is something that is wildly popular, especially with Americans. They're, let's just say, 40 and under, although at all ages they're watching. And what we see is that more and more the younger generation are watching soccer. They're playing it and they're watching it. But what are they watching? Well, if you live in Albuquerque, you have maybe two favorite teams that you watch. You have New Mexico United. Hopefully that's our job. And then you have a second team. And that second team could be a team in Monterrey, Mexico. It could be Barcelona or Liverpool or Bayern Munich. It's probably one of the top brands in the world where they have superstars playing for. What they're probably not doing is having the Colorado Rapids or FC Dallas be their second team because they're not in their community. And so it's very different in America with soccer than, let's say, the NFL. In the NFL, if I live in New Mexico, I don't have a team. So I either have, for me, the Patriots. I was born there. If you're born here, you're a Cowboy fan or a Bronco fan, and so that's how you watch your NFL. And if you're a German and you love football, American football, you're also watching the NFL, but nobody in Germany is watching the MLS, or probably except for you with the USL. So all I'm really saying is that in America, soccer is going to develop in a way that is completely regionalized. It won't just be 25 or 30 teams that dominate the market. And the global aspect of the MLS is definitely going to be truncated because it's going to be very hard for MLS to break into a top 5 league in the world, which means that they're really not going to get global market share. So that is a huge opportunity in the United States to build a local soccer club, to be part of this professional sports landscape, and to have a seat at the table in a way that's relevant and matters. And that just doesn't exist in any other league in America.
No, I would agree with that. And I think one of the most incredible things, as I've obviously followed the USL for some time now, is just, to your point, the local feel, right? You see what some of these teams in the Northeast are doing, getting 5,000-6,000 people at I guess it's a high school football stadium. I think that's Vermont.
Yeah, amazing.
Just like that is what we are investing in at Momenta Sports, is where can these sports teams come into these really unique, growing or maybe not growing communities and be something that people can be excited about. And part of that excitement is related to the players on the pitch. Share whatever you feel comfortable here, but I'm curious, and I'm sure the audience is curious, is, what does a USL typical player make in a season? Go into anything that you can about roster size, and maybe you have your best player, and I know it's different from club to club. Some are willing to spend more, some are willing to spend less. Can you give some context there on how a roster is made up and how players are compensated?
Yeah, I mean, unlike the MLS, we don't share data. The teams don't submit to each other what every player is making. But at one extreme, every single player on your team needs to make at a minimum the minimum wage salary, annualized. So let's just call that around $30,000. Now, there's different things that make that up. It could be the salary. A lot of players get housing because they're young, they don't have a track record of a job, and they're here for a year, so they're not even qualifying for an apartment. So there are some things like that around housing and some smaller, perks. But so on one end, you sort of have minimum wage. And look, if you're 20 years old, that's not a bad place to start. On the other hand, I think we have a player this year making $200,000. And now I would say in that range, most players are going to fall 100,000 and less. but we certainly have players making over 100,000. The interesting thing about that is I believe the MLS veteran minimum right now is 104,000. So we have players playing in our league that are making more money than they would make in the MLS. And I think in the last year or two, I can actually point to some players that have decided they would rather play in the USL Championship, get paid well, and actually play every day and be a star versus sit on the back end of a bench and maybe get a play here and a play there. And I think that, and I think that's a very interesting trend. So you can't just say that we definitely have players on every USL Championship team, including New Mexico United, that are absolutely good enough to be on an MLS roster. Then you'd say, well, why wouldn't they be? Because they try out, and it's just because on the MLS level, they pray to a lot of different gods. And yes, they have their team, but they have development players. They want 17 and 18-year-olds because that could be an asset in the future. So they would much rather have a 18-year-old who isn't as talented as a 28-year-old on their roster, especially if that 28-year-old wasn't going to be an everyday starter and contributor. And then the last piece about that is also, we talk about America so much, and we have today. America is not the epicenter of soccer, of football. It's played all over the world, and it's a ubiquitous market, and our players could play anywhere in the world. But in the MLS, you're limited, and also in the USL, you have 7 or 8 international spots. And so those are usually reserved for players that are going to start or be major contributors. So a lot of time we have international players that aren't going to be a top 5 or 6 on an MLS team. They can come to the USL Championship, make a great salary, and be a star. So that's what makes it so interesting as an owner. It is the Wild West when it comes to players, and the world literally is your oyster.
So, one of the things, Peter, that I've wondered now, and I've looked at rosters, and you see players, coming to the USL that have, been international players. You also see players that are coming directly out of college. There's been a lot of change with the NIL, with revenue sharing. That's impacting a lot of sports beyond basketball and beyond football. Are the athletes that you're bringing in today, are these international players? Are they coming from other rosters? Do you look at the collegiate system for players that are graduating? Like, where is that ecosystem of athletes coming from?
Yeah, well, a couple of things on that point. First of all, when I started the team, I recruited our head coach, and I recruited our first player, who was Devin Sandoval. He played in the MLS. He's from New Mexico, and I knew I wanted him to be the first guy that we signed, just to set the tone for what it was like. But after that, it's that is the job of our sporting director, Itamar Kanan, who's amazing. He used to be a former sports agent. He knows the landscape, and he's the one that is going out there and doing the research. We would sign anyone from anywhere. So there's a couple different buckets you mentioned. There is one on local talent. We actually have our own academy system, which isn't there to really be a feeder for New Mexico United, but it is there to allow the best athletes in New Mexico access to our pro coaching. It's 100% scholarship. It's not a moneymaker. It's a community giver. And we have signed a couple players from there onto the pro team, but that's a very small part. The biggest, so going to the other side, the biggest bucket for us are going to be probably current USL Championship players. We have the film, we know the level of competition, we know who they are, what they can do, what they can't do. And so that's where we're going to go. On the collegiate level, MLS has a draft, and a lot of times most of the draft picks do not end up making the club. So sometimes there's a fallout on the back of that, or what ends up happening is 2 or 3 years after they graduate from college, maybe they get drafted by Austin, FC Austin, in the first round, a number pick 12. They end up playing mostly on the 2 team in Austin. Maybe they get a few games in the MLS, but it's pretty clear they're not going to break in a meaningful level in the MLS. So now that player's like, okay, I want to be a pro. Where am I going to go? USL Championship is a great home. So there's a big flow of that. And then we're talking to mostly sports agents that represent players from all over the world, and finding out, where the stories are. One of the things about our league, and almost like every league in the world, I mean, I always talk about the talent in soccer being this. It's this steep funnel. Every player, every coach, every team president is trying to funnel up to one of like 10 or 15 teams in the world. So if you're not playing for Liverpool or Barcelona or, PSG, you're not at the top of the pyramid. You're something lower than that. And so, when you look at USL championship players, everybody sort of has a wart on them. They're super talented, but maybe there's just something that they're not doing well. And that actually could just be their age. They're just at an age where they're not as attractive for transferring on. And so we look at all those things, and we get a lot of players that have caps with like the U17 or 18 national team in the United States, but they've had an injury, they went abroad, it didn't work out. There was some personal circumstance, and they're trying to reset their career. And we probably have 4 or 5 guys on our team that are in that position. And if they can reset it and go up, great. But they might also find that championship's a great place to make a 6-figure salary and be a pro.
I mean, every league needs great talent, and it's obvious that I think the USL will continue to draw more and more talent. And I think as the league becomes more exciting on a global level, maybe more similar to the European system or some of the widely accepted systems, players who are growing up may start to look at it a little bit differently than perhaps they have in the past.
Right.
And to that point, there have been some announcements over the last couple of months, 2 in particular, that I'd like to just get your general take on, maybe the positives or some of the drawbacks. But one being that the USL may move to a promotion-relegation system, which for us as investors is an interesting concept to start to process. I do recognize that, like in English football, teams are only trading at 2 or 3 time multiples because of the threat of relegation. So I'm interested in your perspective of how that perhaps comes over. But the second is the addition of a new top division league within the USL pyramid, where the championship that you're all in now, as I understand it, would be kind of the second division within the USL. What are the things that are salient to you about those 2 big announcements, and what do you think they mean for the league?
Yeah, I mean, I think I commend our fellow owners for being brave and moving forward with promotion relegation, as well as League One, Division One status, and I think
Division One status. What does that mean? Is that the U.S. soccer system?
Yeah, that's great. So in the U.S., again, if you're just a sports fan, you understand you got the NHL and NBA and NFL, and they're kind of like the thing. But in U.S. Soccer, there's an overarching body, which is the U.S. Soccer Organization, and they have divisions. Division 1, Division 2, Division 3 are the 3 pro divisions, and then there's amateur divisions. In order to have a league that is in one of those divisions, certain qualifications need to be made. It has to do with the wealth of the ownership group, the stadium facilities, things of that, playing a national schedule, being in all the time zones. And so if you can meet all those criteria as a league, then you can apply and be sanctioned into that division. So what the USL has said, and what we have said, is the only thing holding us back from being on the same division as MLS, because MLS wants to be the only one there, is we're the only ones holding ourselves back. So if we think we can get 12 teams that meet the criteria, we can have Division One status. And so there's an active pursuit of that. And the league's working hard to find those 12 teams. In addition then to having the highest tier you can get in the United States, we have a whole ecosystem of divisions behind it. So we'll have a Division 1, a Division 2, and a Division 3, and even multiple categories within those divisions. Once that plays out, we want to have what's called promotion and relegation, meaning that if you're in Division 2 and you win the championship, you would actually get promoted into the Division 1 league. And if you're the worst team, you'd get promoted out. I think it's going to be wildly exciting if we could pull it off. If you're an NBA fan, imagine if you're the New Jersey Nets and you came in last place, instead of getting the first pick in the draft, you have to go play the Maine Lobsters, and the winner of that game stays in the NBA, and the loser goes down to the G League. I'll tell you what, the Nets would be playing all their players late in the season, and they'd be making trades to improve their team. The bottom teams would be making huge moves in the NBA to improve their status that season, not emptying out the bench and selling all their players off so they can go get a top draft pick. It would be a complete game changer. And unfortunately, I just don't think those leagues are brave enough to take that risk, because they worry about the team that goes down. But if you take a big enough view, I think it actually creates a lot more value. So anyways, it's something that I think you could do in some other leagues, or you could do in college football without getting too distracted. Why not just have the top 20 teams be in the top division, and everyone gets slotted, and if you win your group, you move up, and and so that would be wildly exciting if you're trying to work. If you're Kent State and you start in 7th division, you work your way all the way up to Division 1. So in an NIL world, I think it's really possible. So those are some of the big dreams, and I'd love to see them happen. And we just happen to have a multi-decade timeline, and if we think out far enough, these things can all happen.
You mentioned some of those qualifications for being at the Division 1 status. One of those being stadium and stadium size, perhaps. I know that you all over the last few years have really been working extremely hard, sometimes with some friction, which is natural when you're doing projects of this scale and involving the local community as a part of the process. And I don't want to bring up any PTSD from just the challenges of pulling off a project like that. But if we could take a step back and just talk about, you all have been incredibly successful in the lab, as we spoke about earlier, drawing 10, 11,000 fans to games. The next natural progression is for you all to have your own stadium. There are a handful of things that stick out to me as to why an ownership group would want to control their own stadium. Simply controlling your own schedule. Like, when can you play home matches, right? Is just one of the very, very kind of simple reasons for having one. But as an owner, what are some of with whatever you're comfortable sharing, what are some of the big unlockings if you have your own stadium? Perhaps that's from a revenue perspective, ticketing, size of venue. Like, what are the big reasons for you all in pursuit of your stadium there in Balloon Fiesta Park?
Yeah, the stadium is important. I think a stadium represents more than just a physical, building. I think it represents an abundance mindset. It sends a signal that a city is growing when you add stadiums, that a community wants to invest in its future, and they want to create amenities that bring people together, and it shows growth. Ironically, I think some of the areas that are the hardest to build stadiums are in the areas that need it the most, that have more of a scarcity mindset, and either or, that somehow building a stadium will take away from the homeless crisis, or safety of the streets, and that's disappointing. And so we've probably struggled more than we should to build a privately funded stadium, which sounds absurd. We should just be able to build it. It's America. But in Albuquerque, it's been a challenge, but we are going to keep going. So our job here is just, we don't quit, and we just keep plowing forward. And, we're not going to let a few people try to get in the way of that. That being said, owning, when you look at the economics of a championship team, or any kind of even, non sort of Division 1 sport team, where you're not going to have a big media deal, you're not going to have massive national sponsorship. Those are really great aspirations, but they are so far down the line. It's a live event business, and you need to be able to control, as you said, you want to be able to have a lot of control over that live event. So when we have our own facility, rather than playing in a AAA baseball stadium where we convert the field with temporary grass, and have to use the dates that are available to us, we can control the dates. We can control the food and the beverages and the parking and the experience, and we'll hire the people that are greedy people. It will be our own. The vibe will be all New Mexico United, and that's important from a cultural point of view, but then also economically, of course. If you're able to generate some additional money from parking, concessions, that means that you might have more flexibility on ticket prices. You might have more of an incentive to try to fill your stadium versus having empty seats. So, and I think more importantly than that is we'd love to have a professional women's team of some sort. We want to do other events. We want to host high school soccer events, and it also could be other sports like lacrosse and rugby, or it could be a UFC event or a concert. There's so much more that we like to do with this facility than just play soccer in it. And the community, broadly speaking, of New Mexico and Albuquerque, New Mexico, deserves more facilities to really just have, no professional soccer stadium in this state is kind of a crime and a disappointment. So we're gonna make it happen.
So you've been in the league 7 years now. Give me your take on how much focus there is at the USL level and at the individual team level to have their own stadiums. Like, obviously you're seeing a number of new clubs pop up, which is great for the league as long as, more and more sophisticated owners continue to come in. But always kind of underwritten with some new stadium project and maybe some mixed use real estate around that stadium. But how important do you think the teams across the league having their own venues, how important is that to the league's long-term success?
I mean, it's critical. And the good news is, as the price for purchasing a USL championship license has gone up, I've heard the current fee is about $25 million. So meaning that if you're going to spend $25 million just to get a license, you have a lot of resources, which also means a lot of the new owners coming in have a vision of, a multi-use facility that is maybe an anchor tenant in a bigger real estate project. That's not what we're doing currently in New Mexico, but I understand why people are doing it that way. And it's it can be a very successful avenue. So I think that the newer owners are everyone's trying to figure out their stadium situation. Some have been able to do that better than others. Some teams just have like pop up. You look at a Phoenix, you look at a lot of teams, they have very simple pop-up stadiums. I'll call pop-up, meaning they use modular technology. Same if you were at a PGA golf tournament, but they're really effective. And then you have other teams like Lexington just came in and they built a $60 million facility that allows them to have a pro women's team, men's team, and do other things. And while it uses a lot of modular technology, they have some suites. There's more of a concourse feel. So I think you see teams are trying to figure out their situation and in one way or the other. And, with us, we really want to make sure we build something great at the same time with prices going up. This is not a woe is me comment. What we wanted to build with $30 or $40 million 5 or 6 years ago is going to build a lot less. But what we need to do is not focus on that. We need to focus on getting started, get something up and running, and we can expand it as we have success. So it's just critical that we get moving on that. In the meantime, we'll keep playing at the lab.
And you guys are creating a great environment there. So I know the fans aren't upset about showing up there, and obviously they've continued to do that week in and week out for you. Where do I want to go here as we get close to the end? One of the things that's been very obvious if you're paying attention is that there is a lot of capital, a lot of groups, platforms moving into sports as an asset class generally. And that's a great thing in many ways. For owners like you, there's more capital will potentially come in and support your growth trajectory and the plans that you have. I think the sophistication layer adds some strength to the leagues, whatever league that may be globally. But why should investors, let's talk about the USL. Why should investors think about the USL and the clubs in the USL as serious investable assets? And maybe that's evolved over the last 7 years and definitely since the early days of the USL. You saw a lot of those initial successful teams jump up to the MLS, Orlando City, where I'm from, made that move. But I'm on calls all the time where there's expansion USL clubs, there's groups looking to put these teams in place more so than I even heard about 2 years ago. So why do you think that the USL level of club is such a what I'll call a shiny object right now, actually, which is an exciting thing, to investors today? Is it because of the entrance point and the valuations? Is it because of the kind of geographic spread across the US? If there's a geographic kind of area that an investor wants to be in, there's more and more of those opportunities. Like, why do you think these are great assets for investors, just generally recognizing that you've still got to perform and operate and do all the things to make it a great investment?
Yeah, I mean, Kyle, I think you've touched on, some of the reasons, but I think that if you're an investor, first of all, you need to understand the motivation of investors. And when we invested in New Mexico United, I was not thinking about it as an ROI play, even though I have a finance background. I thought New Mexico United, the dividend that it's paying it gets paid in the community, in smiles and in a beautiful way. And now it also has become also a great financial asset for us. We drive about 10 million plus in revenue every year.
Wow.
And so it's a great, financial asset. And we pour a lot of money back into the community one way or the other. So, but if you're an investor, you'd have to ask yourself, one, with the valuations at such, when you see teams like the Lakers going for $10 billion, if you were to buy, $100 worth of the Lakers, what are you hoping to do over the next 10 years? Do you think that's going to 20 billion? Maybe that'd be a great return at 2x. But, when you look at some of these other assets like the USL Championship, you might be able to get $100 of a team that today might be worth, 30 million, but also then could be worth 300 million, which would still make it a fraction of what a higher league could be worth. So I definitely think the risk, while there's more potential return, there's also a lot more risk. Sports teams aren't any different from any other asset. It's about a risk return spectrum. And I think that if you're willing to take on some risk, and I think the USL has done a great job of slowly de-risking the landscape, but it's by no means riskless. As that risk level is going down, valuations are coming up. And I think we've had two teams in the USL Championship that have traded at 100 million, either at or above $100 million. And that's tremendous for all of our clubs.
Totally agree. I totally agree. Let me ask you this as a last question. What's the legacy that you want to leave in Albuquerque, Santa Fe, New Mexico, the state of New Mexico, when your days are over being associated with the team? Maybe that's the day that you go in the ground. Who knows? Like, what do you want Peter's legacy? What do you want people to think about? How do you want to be remembered as it relates to the work you've done, you're doing, and you will do in the future?
Yeah, I mean, legacy, I think is important. It's funny, I mentioned earlier I'm a New England Patriot fan. They just happened to reveal a bronze statue of a very famous Patriot, Tom Brady, and good for him. He's earned it. And I think that's great. But, having a bronze statue, having a building in your name, while that might keep your name alive for a while, is that really a legacy? And I think that when I think about the legacy of New Mexico United, I think about more of a feeling, a legacy of promoting a feeling, going forward. And, one of the things that I talked about with our organization recently that kind of just hit me is I said, who here can name their 8 great grandparents? And I think we might have had one person that could name them all. Some could name one, some didn't know any of them. These are like family members. And so I said, well, which means that, when you're a great grandparent, your great grandkids aren't going to know your name either. So in 100 years, when that happens, you're not going to be known. But if your great grandkid can see a picture of you at a United game and they're a United fan, they're going to know so much about you. They're going to know that you believe in the community, that you thought that we can all come together, that you wanted to be part of something that was providing, that was an investment, not just for yourself, but was an asset that we were going to hand to the future community. So they're going to know so much about you just by seeing you at a United game. And that's the feeling. We talk about, you have an investment background, I do too. We talk about, generational wealth, transferring wealth from one generation to the next, a really simple concept. But you can also give generational feelings like hope or despair. And so I think what we have to, as a community in New Mexico, is the ability to transfer generational hope through this team, through a facility that says, you know what, we care about the future and we want to create this asset, New Mexico United 1.0. We want to hand it to the next generation 2.0 and let you know that we think that you're worth it and you're valuable enough. And if we can do a good job of that, that group can then transfer the asset forward. And if we don't do those things, what you can end up happening is you can transfer despair or feelings of negativity that the future isn't worth it. And we need to guard against that at all costs. So that's a big part of our platform. That's what we're entrusted to do. And that, if we do a good job, our legacy will reflect that feeling more than a statue or a name.
I love that. I mean, really fits into the core principles that we think about when we're investing for Momenta Sports, and kind of looking beyond, like, what is the future goal of this organization, of their leadership, of oftentimes the control owner, right? Like, what legacy do they want to leave? And it just stood out to us in our time with you that you cared so much about the state, the city, and you can feel it. Like, that stuff is real. Like, when you have that mindset and you actually stick to those principles, it manifests itself in really incredible ways. And I saw that, and I hope that other teams around the league and in professional sports look at what you all have done in New Mexico and Albuquerque. I think it's a great test case to see what success can look like. I know a lot of times it's success is judged by championships and those types of things, but in this case, I think it's so much bigger than that. And I think you should hear it all the time that you've done an incredible job, and certainly you were inspiring for us as we kind of stepped into this journey. New Mexico was the first club that we looked at, and you were the first owner that I spent significant time with, still the owner that I've spent the most significant time with. And so we were just really happy to have you on this show, on this podcast, to tell your story. And so really wish you the best of luck throughout the rest of the season. I know you're somewhere 6th or 7th on the table right now, so still pushing here in the second half of the year. So we'll be following you, rooting for you guys from afar. And then I really, for any listeners out there, I really think you should take a look, going back to what we were talking about earlier from a marketing and social perspective. Take a look at what New Mexico's done on all their social channels. We'll link those in the description or comment section below. So you can take a look at what Peter and his team have done. I think it sets a great example for the way that teams should show up on social media throughout the league. So really appreciate you joining us today, Peter, on our Momenta Sports podcast. And we'll definitely be following you the rest of this year and be in touch.
Hey, let's go. Thanks so much, Kyle. You've got a great team. Say hi to everybody for me, and Somos Unidos, and let's go get it. Vamos.